Ryan Smith pulled into his driveway, the weight of a long day hanging on his shoulders. For once, the early escape from work felt like a gift. He smiled, thinking of Alicia and Jack. Alicia had said she'd be home after some yoga and had picked Jack up from school. Maybe they'd surprise him with dinner, or just enjoy a quiet evening together. It sounded perfect, but something stopped him in his tracks. A car sat parked near the garage, a sleek, black Mercedes-Benz that didn't belong. Ryan frowned, gripping the steering wheel for a moment. None of Alicia's friends drove anything like that. His first thought was harmless. Maybe a neighbor had parked there for a second. But as he stepped out, the unease gnawed at him. Ryan walked up to the car and glanced inside. Expensive leather seats, gym bags thrown in the back. He couldn't shake the feeling, his stomach twisting slightly as he headed toward the front door. That's when he heard it. "Daddy!" Jack's voice called, cracking mid-sentence as the little boy came running from around the corner of the house. His cheeks were streaked with tears. Ryan crouched immediately, concern flaring inside him. He held Jack's small shoulders. "What's wrong, buddy? Why are you crying?" Jack hiccuped, burying his face in Ryan's chest for a moment before looking up, eyes wide with fear. "Mom's acting weird, Daddy. There's someone in the bedroom," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryan's heart skipped. His mind spun in a dozen directions. "Someone in the bedroom," he repeated, though the words barely registered. "Who?" "I don't know," Jack sobbed. "I heard them." Mom was yelling, but not like normal. The knot in Ryan's stomach tightened into a fist. His thoughts raced. He rubbed Jack's back gently, trying to keep calm. He needed to figure out what was happening. "It's okay," Ryan said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "It's going to be fine. Why don't you play in the backyard for a little while? I'll go see what's going on." Jack hesitated, looking toward the house, but Ryan squeezed his shoulder. "It's all right, buddy. Daddy's got it." The boy sniffled, nodded reluctantly, and ran toward the yard, casting one last nervous glance at the house. Ryan stood, the uneasy feeling turning into something sharper. He opened the front door slowly, trying to keep everything in check. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for faint voices coming from upstairs. Ryan's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he moved silently toward the staircase. His thoughts screamed at him to stop, to walk out the door and pretend nothing was wrong. But his legs moved on their own, carrying him up one step at a time. Halfway up, he heard it more clearly, muffled voices. A man's voice. His heart pounded harder, anger rising as the pieces fell into place. He clenched his fists. The knot in his stomach had now grown into a burning anger that filled his chest. He reached the landing and stared at the closed bedroom door, the familiar wood grain suddenly looking foreign to him. Every step felt heavy, like moving through water. Ryan stood in front of the door, his mind racing, trying to find an explanation that didn't involve the worst-case scenario. Maybe Alicia was just talking to someone about something harmless. Maybe, but Jack's words rang in his ears. "Someone's in the bedroom." Ryan reached for the doorknob. His hand hovered above it, every instinct telling him not to open it. But something more primal pushed him forward. His fingers wrapped around the cold metal, twisting it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a scene that shattered his reality. Alicia lay naked in their bed, tangled in the sheets with Brad, the personal trainer she'd hired months ago. The sweat on their skin made everything feel immediate, undeniable. Ryan stood in the doorway, frozen. His heart pounded so loudly it was deafening. For a moment, no one moved. They were like three statues in a grotesque display, all aware that this moment would change everything. "Ryan!" Alicia gasped, her face pale as she yanked the sheets up to cover her body. She sat up, eyes wide, her mouth moving but no real words coming out. Beside her, Brad stumbled out of bed, tripping over the tangled blankets as he fumbled to grab his clothes from the floor. "Wait, just wait," Brad stammered, his hands shaking as he tried to get his jeans back on. His voice cracked under the pressure of panic, but he still couldn't make himself move fast enough. Ryan hadn't said a word yet, and it made everything more terrifying. Ryan's hands trembled, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. Every muscle in his body screamed for action, but the cold, steady rage held him still. His vision blurred for a second, his brain struggling to reconcile what he was seeing. Alicia, his wife, in bed with another man. The sheets they'd shared for years, now sullied. Alicia reached for him, her hand outstretched, her voice trembling. "Ryan, please, I'm so sorry." But she didn't get to finish. Brad, panicking, cut her off. "Listen, man, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his hands up in the air like he was surrendering. "I swear, I can explain." Ryan's lips twitched, his teeth grinding together as he stared at Brad. "Explain?" His voice came out in a low hiss, cold and controlled, belying the fury simmering underneath. "You're going to explain why you're naked in my house, in my bed, with my wife?" Alicia flinched at his words, tears welling in her eyes. She pulled the sheet tighter around herself, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. "Ryan, please, I'm sorry. I can explain too. Just let me..." "Explain?" Ryan cut her off, his voice now sharp, dangerous. He felt his control slipping, but he held on. His fists clenched again, nails digging into his palms as he stepped further into the room. Alicia shrank back, but Brad tried to step forward, his hand outstretched in a pathetic attempt to calm the situation. "Look, man," Brad said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I'll make it right. I swear. Here, just take this." He fumbled with his wallet, his hands shaking so much that he nearly dropped it. He finally pulled out a thick wad of cash, holding it out like it was some sort of peace offering. $7,000, man. Just take it. Forget this ever happened. No one has to know. We can move on from this. No harm done, right? But you did. Otherwise I will. Ryan's eyes locked onto the money, and something inside him snapped, but not in the way Brad expected. He didn't explode. He didn't yell or throw punches. Instead, his lip curled in disgust as he stared at the money in Brad's trembling hands. $7,000. As if that could erase the betrayal. As if that could undo the wreckage this moment had caused. The room seemed to freeze in that instant, the air thick with tension. Ryan could hear Alicia sobbing softly now, her guilt palpable. Brad stood awkwardly, still holding out the money, clearly terrified of what Ryan might do next. But Ryan felt something colder settle in him, something darker and more dangerous. Without a word, he reached into his back pocket, pulling out his phone. He hit the record button and pointed the camera directly at them, his expression unreadable. Brad's face twisted in confusion, fear etched in every line. What are you doing, man? You don't need to." "How about," Ryan interrupted, his voice calm, almost eerily so, "we make this a little more interesting?" The venom in his words made Brad flinch. Alicia's sobs grew louder, her eyes wide as she realized what was happening. "Ryan, no, please," she begged, clutching the sheet tighter as if it could protect her from what was coming. "Don't do this." Ryan ignored her, his focus squarely on Brad now. "You thought you could walk in here, into my home, and throw money at me like I just roll over and take it?" His voice was steady, controlled, but his eyes burned with fury. "You're going to pay for this, but not with your money. No, I'm going to make sure you both regret this for the rest of your lives." Brad's face drained of color. "Look, man, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for this to happen. Just turn off the camera, and we'll talk this out." Ryan didn't move. He just stared at Brad, his hand still holding the phone steady, capturing every second. Alicia cried harder, her pleas growing more desperate, but Ryan barely heard her. His focus was entirely on the man standing in front of him, the man who had taken everything from him in one careless, selfish moment. "No one's talking," Ryan said, his voice low and controlled. "You're going to sit there, and you're going to watch while I take back what's mine." Brad backed up a step, his hands still raised, eyes darting toward the door as if considering his escape. But there was nowhere to go. Ryan had all the power now, and he wasn't about to let go of it. Ryan's movements were quick, deliberate. He didn't hesitate as he reached into the nightstand drawer and pulled out 2 zip ties, thick and industrial, the kind he used for home repairs. His hands were steady, his mind focused on one goal, revenge. The moment was a blur for Brad and Alicia, both frozen in shock as they watched him with wide, terrified eyes. Brad was the first to react, stumbling backward, his hands in the air. "Wait, man, wait. You don't need to." Ryan wasn't listening. In a swift motion, He grabbed Brad by the arm, spinning him around and pushing him to the floor with a force that took the man's breath away. Ryan yanked Brad's hands behind his back and secured them tightly with the zip tie. The sharp plastic dug into Brad's wrists, and he winced, but he didn't struggle. Fear kept him compliant. "What are you doing?" Alicia shrieked, her voice high and panicked. She tried to move, to scramble off the bed, but Ryan was faster. Before she could make it far, he pushed her back onto the mattress, pinning her down with ease. She flailed, trying to fight him off, but Ryan's grip was firm. He grabbed another zip tie and bound her wrists together, the plastic biting into her skin as she cried out. "Ryan, stop!" Alicia sobbed, her voice breaking as she realized just how far he was willing to go. "Please stop this. We can talk." Ryan's eyes bore into hers, but his expression remained eerily calm. "You're going to sit here," he said, his voice steady but cold. "And you're going to watch while I destroy everything you care about." Alicia's face crumpled, her sobs coming harder now, but Ryan was already turning away. Brad began to plead, his voice shaking. "Man, don't do this. We can fix this, all right? Just let us go. Don't make things worse." Ryan didn't bother responding. His mind was set, his focus razor-sharp. He walked out of the bedroom, the muffled sobs and frantic whispers of Alicia and Brad fading behind him as he made his way downstairs. With every step, his anger swelled, but it was a controlled anger now, one that guided his actions. When he reached the front door, Ryan paused for a brief moment, taking in the sight of Brad's flashy black Mercedes-Benz in the driveway. The car was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, a monument to Brad's arrogance, parked so casually in front of the home Ryan had built. It only made him angrier. He headed straight for the garage. The crowbar hung neatly on the wall, and Ryan grabbed it without hesitation, gripping it tightly in his hand. The weight felt good, solid. He stepped back outside, the cool air doing nothing to soothe the rage simmering just beneath the surface. Ryan approached the car slowly, his breath steady as he raised the crowbar high above his head. For a brief second, he could hear Alicia's voice in his mind, pleading, begging him to stop. But that voice was drowned out by the sound of the crowbar smashing through the windshield. The glass shattered in a brilliant display, cracks spiderwebbing across the entire surface. Ryan didn't stop there. He swung the crowbar again and again, each hit releasing a bit more of the anger burning inside him. Upstairs, he could hear faint shouts from Alicia and Brad, their voices muffled through the walls. Their desperation only fueled him further. Ryan moved around the car methodically, smashing the side mirrors, the headlights, leaving the car unrecognizable. He took a step back for a moment, his chest heaving, then raised the crowbar once more, slamming it into the tires, puncturing them one by one. The hiss of air escaping from the tires was oddly satisfying. But he wasn't done yet. Ryan turned to look at Alicia's car, parked just beside Brad's. It was a simple, modest vehicle, the one they had used for family trips, grocery runs, school drop-offs, memories that now felt tainted. In this moment, it wasn't just her car. It represented her betrayal, her lies, everything she had hidden from him. Ryan didn't hesitate. He swung the crowbar at the driver's side window, the glass exploding outwards in a shower of shards. He moved quickly around the car, repeating the same motions, slashing the tires, breaking the windows, each impact a release of the rage that had been building since the moment he walked in on them. The sound of breaking glass, the screech of tires giving way, filled the air. Inside the house, Ryan could still hear the faint sounds of their desperate screams. Alicia's voice cracked, pleading through her sobs, and Brad's shouts were growing more frantic. But there was nothing they could do. They were powerless, tied up and helpless, forced to listen as Ryan dismantled the symbols of their infidelity. When Ryan finally stepped back, both cars were ruined. The driveway was littered with glass, the metallic smell of destruction filling the air. Ryan stood there for a moment, his chest rising and falling as the adrenaline coursed through him. It wasn't enough. He wasn't satisfied. But it was a start. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, his breathing slowing. He turned, glancing back toward the house. Upstairs, Alicia and Brad were still screaming, their voices growing more desperate now, realizing that Ryan wasn't just venting his anger. He was dismantling their lives. Ryan took a deep breath, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. Ryan stood at the doorway, his chest heaving, clothes damp with sweat, and tiny fragments of glass still clinging to his shoes. In his hand, the phone camera was still recording, capturing every moment, every whimper and plea from the two people tied helplessly on the bed. Brad, pale and drenched in cold sweat, was frantically wriggling against the zip ties, while Alicia's sobs filled the room, her voice hoarse from crying. Ryan looked down at them, the cold satisfaction settling deep in his bones. They had no idea what was coming. Now, Ryan said, pointing the phone toward them, the red recording light blinking ominously. His voice was low and controlled, each word deliberate. You two are going to leave my house. But don't think for a second that this is over. Alicia's sobs quieted slightly as she tried to catch her breath. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, red, and filled with desperation. Ryan, please, she choked out between sobs, her voice breaking. What do you mean? What are you going to do? Ryan crouched down beside her, his face inches from hers, his eyes burning with an intensity she had never seen before. The man she had known, the one who had loved her, trusted her, was gone. This was just the beginning, he whispered, his voice so quiet it barely reached her over the sound of her own crying. You're going to suffer for this, and I'm going to make sure of it. Both of you. Alicia whimpered, trembling as she tried to pull her hands free, but the zip ties held firm. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, she mumbled, shaking her head as if denying reality could undo what had been done. Ryan straightened up and turned his attention to Brad, who was staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. You, Ryan growled, walking over to where Brad was sitting awkwardly on the floor. You thought you could come into my house, into my life, and take what's mine? Brad, his mouth dry and voice shaky, stammered out, Look, man, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen. Just let me go, and I swear I'll never come near you or Alicia again. I'll disappear. I'll give you whatever you want. Just... Ryan cut him off with a harsh laugh, cold and mocking. You think this is about money? About making a deal? No, this isn't going to be that easy for you. He reached down and grabbed Brad by the collar of his shirt, yanking him up to his knees. You're going to feel what I felt when I walked in here and saw you in my bed. You're going to feel every bit of it. Brad whimpered, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. Please, man, he begged. Just let me go. We can fix this. I'll do anything. Ryan stared at him, unblinking, his grip tightening on Brad's shirt. Anything, he echoed, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Oh, you'll do anything, all right. Without warning, Ryan let go of Brad and stood up. He walked over to the bedroom window, yanking the curtain open to reveal the destruction outside. Brad's car, his prized possession, was nothing more than a pile of broken glass and crumpled metal, barely recognizable after Ryan's rampage. Alicia's car sat beside it, similarly demolished. The sight was enough to send Brad into another fit of desperate pleading. Oh God, Brad whispered, his voice breaking. My car, what did you do? What did you? I told you, Ryan interrupted, his voice deadly calm as he turned back to them. I'm going to take everything from you, just like you took everything from me. Alicia sobbed louder, her entire body shaking. Please, Ryan, don't do this. We can talk. We can work through this. Just don't what? Ryan barked, his anger flaring again. Don't make you pay for what you did? Don't make you face the consequences of your actions? No, Alicia. That's not how this works. You made your choices. Alicia's breath hitched as she stared up at him, her mind spinning with the weight of the situation. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered, her voice so soft it was barely audible. Ryan looked down at her, his face hard, expressionless. You didn't just hurt me, Alicia. You broke everything we had, everything I trusted you with. His words cut like a knife, and Alicia flinched as if she had been physically struck. For a moment, silence fell over the room. The only sounds were Alicia's stifled sobs and Brad's labored breathing as he continued to try and loosen the zip ties. Ryan let the silence stretch, feeling the weight of it press down on both of them. It was almost unbearable, and that's exactly what he wanted. Finally, Ryan spoke again, his voice low and filled with grim finality. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. Your friends, your family, they're going to know the truth. And you're going to live with that shame for the rest of your life. Alicia's eyes widened in terror. No, no, Ryan, please. Don't ruin our lives. Don't tell, it's already ruined, Ryan said, cutting her off. You did that, not me. He pointed the camera back at her, the red recording light blinking steadily. This is going everywhere, Alicia. Every lie you've told, every secret you've kept, it's all coming out. Brad, still struggling, started to cry, his voice cracking as he pleaded. Please, man, don't do this. We can make it right. We can. Ryan turned to him, his eyes narrowing. You've had your chance to make things right. Now it's my turn. He moved toward the door, leaving Alicia and Brad bound and helpless. Ryan paused at the threshold, turning back to look at them one last time. I hope you're ready, he said quietly, because this is just the beginning. With that, he walked out, closing the door behind him, leaving them in the suffocating silence of their own choices. The weight of what was to come hung in the air like a storm waiting to break, and Ryan, for the first time that day, felt in control. The days following Ryan's confrontation were the quiet before the storm, an unnerving stillness that came before his full plan took shape. Ryan had always been methodical, and his revenge would be no different. While Alicia and Brad struggled to pick up the pieces from that night, Ryan had already started setting the next phase in motion. His first target was Brad. Ryan sat in his office one afternoon, the faint glow of his laptop illuminating his cold expression. He scrolled through Brad's social media profiles, gathering every bit of information he could find. It didn't take long to figure out who Brad's top clients were at the gym, along with his boss and fellow trainers. A simple email, sent anonymously, carried the bomb that would explode Brad's career. The email was short and to the point. Attached was the video Ryan had taken, along with a brief note. Is this the kind of man you want representing your gym? Ryan hit send and leaned back in his chair, knowing that Brad's life was about to unravel. At the gym, Brad was mid-session with a client when his phone buzzed relentlessly in his pocket. He ignored it at first, but the notifications kept coming. After a few minutes, his manager stormed into the training area, face red with anger. Brad, my office. Now, the manager barked, causing everyone in the gym to stop and stare. Confused, Brad followed his manager into the back office. The moment the door shut behind him, the manager shoved his phone toward Brad, the screen displaying the video. Alicia's naked form, his panicked expression, and Ryan's calm, vengeful words played on loop. What the hell is this? The manager spat, his eyes burning with disgust. Brad's heart dropped into his stomach. He tried to stammer out an excuse, but nothing he said could erase the footage. The damage was done. I don't want to hear it, the manager snapped. You're fired. Get your stuff and get out. I don't care what happened. This is disgusting. And I'll be sure no other gym in town hires you after this. Brad's face went pale. Wait, please, he began, but his manager cut him off with a wave of his hand. Leave. Now. Brad left the office in a daze, feeling the weight of every eye in the gym on him. By the time he reached his car, his phone was buzzing again, this time from clients canceling their sessions. His reputation was ruined, his livelihood destroyed. Meanwhile, Ryan turned his focus to Alicia. He knew that the fallout from the divorce would be the final nail in the coffin for her, but he wanted to ensure that every part of her life crumbled before her eyes. The divorce proceedings were swift. Ryan had compiled all the evidence, including the video, and presented it to the court. Alicia's tearful apologies meant nothing to the judge. The betrayal was clear, and with Ryan's high-powered attorney by his side, he easily won full custody of Jack. In court, Alicia stood there trembling, her eyes red and swollen as she pleaded with the judge. Please, Your Honor, I love my son. I made a terrible mistake, but I shouldn't lose him because of it. Ryan sat in silence, watching as the judge turned to Alicia with a stern expression. Your actions have consequences, Mrs. Smith. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that the stability of the child would be best maintained with Mr. Smith. You will have visitation rights, but the custody will remain with the father. Alicia's sobs echoed through the courtroom as the gavel came down, sealing her fate. Outside the courthouse, Ryan took Jack's hand, looking down at his son who had been shielded from the legal mess as much as possible. Jack tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, is Mom going to be okay?" Jack asked, his innocent eyes full of confusion. Ryan knelt down to meet his son's gaze, trying to smile despite the bitterness in his heart. "She'll be fine, buddy," he said, ruffling Jack's hair. "It's just sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. But I'll always be here for you." Jack nodded, but Ryan could see the uncertainty in his son's eyes. He knew that, in time, things would heal, at least for Jack. But for Alicia, the healing would take much longer, if it ever came at all. The aftermath of the divorce left Alicia reeling. Word spread quickly in their tight-knit community. Friends she had once confided in stopped answering her calls. Parents at Jack's school whispered behind her back when she showed up for her limited visitation hours. Her once comfortable life in their suburban home was replaced with a rundown, one-bedroom apartment in the less desirable part of town. One night, as Alicia sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills and takeout containers, she stared blankly at the flickering television. Her life had crumbled around her, and there was no escaping the weight of her guilt. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see Ryan's cold stare, could hear his words echoing in her mind. This is just the beginning. She tried to pick up the pieces. She looked for work, but her tarnished reputation made it impossible. She tried to reach out to old friends, but they turned their backs on her, unwilling to be associated with her public disgrace. She tried to call Brad, but he had long since stopped answering her calls. His own life had fallen apart, and there was no room for Alicia in it anymore. Alicia sat there, staring at her phone, her finger hovering over Ryan's number. She wanted to call him, to beg for forgiveness, to ask if there was any way they could find a path back to what they once were. But she knew it was futile. The man she had betrayed wasn't the same man anymore, and she wasn't the same woman. Meanwhile, Ryan moved on with his life, not with triumph, but with a quiet sense of justice. He had done what he needed to do. He and Jack built a new routine together, one that was peaceful and free from the lies and deceit that had once poisoned their home. Ryan still felt the sting of betrayal deep in his chest, but he found solace in knowing that Jack was safe and happy. They had each other, and that was enough. As for Alicia and Brad, they had become nothing more than distant echoes of a nightmare that Ryan had left behind. Their lives, once so intertwined with his, had unraveled completely, just as he had planned. Months had passed since the day Ryan's life imploded. In the aftermath of the chaos, he had spent countless hours rebuilding his sense of normalcy for the sake of Jack. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Ryan stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, while Jack sat at the table drawing. The house was quiet now, peaceful, just how Ryan wanted it. "Dad, can I have more syrup?" Jack's voice cut through Ryan's thoughts. Ryan smiled, grabbing the syrup bottle and setting it on the table. "Of course, buddy. Just don't drown them, all right?" Jack giggled, pouring syrup in a messy swirl over his stack of pancakes. Ryan couldn't help but chuckle as he watched his son, the simple act of enjoying breakfast filling him with a strange sense of contentment. For so long, there had been tension in the house. Now it felt lighter, like they could breathe again. After breakfast, they went outside to toss a ball around, a new weekend tradition they had established since Alicia's departure. Jack, who had been more subdued during the early stages of the separation, now seemed more lively. His laughter echoed across the yard as he threw the ball, sometimes wildly, missing Ryan by a wide margin. Ryan didn't mind. Each throw, each smile from his son was a reminder that life was slowly moving forward. "You're getting good at this," Ryan praised, catching the ball with ease and tossing it back. "Yeah, but you're still better," Jack said, puffing out his chest, pretending to be serious. "Well, I've got a few more years of practice, kiddo," Ryan grinned. "But keep at it, and you'll be better than me in no time." As the sun began to set, they headed back inside, the day winding down peacefully. Ryan stood at the sink, washing dishes while Jack watched a cartoon in the living room. The sound of his son's laughter mixed with the clinking of plates, a far cry from the shouting matches and cold silences that once defined their evenings when Alicia was still around. Later that evening, after tucking Jack into bed, Ryan sat alone on the porch, a glass of whiskey in hand. The cool night air filled his lungs as he stared at the stars, his mind wandering. The revenge he'd enacted had been methodical, calculated, and precise. He had torn down the lives of both Alicia and Brad, piece by piece, leaving them to flounder in the wreckage of their decisions. But now that the storm had passed, he felt a strange emptiness in its place. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from a mutual friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in months, giving him an update on Alicia. She had lost another job. Financially, she was struggling more than ever. Brad had disappeared from her life, and her attempts to rebuild had been met with failure after failure. Ryan stared at the message for a moment, his thumb hovering over the screen. He could respond, dig deeper in her misery, but he felt nothing. He closed the text and placed the phone face down on the table beside him. Alicia and Brad's fates no longer interested him. He had moved beyond them. They were relics of a past life, a life that he had no intention of revisiting. Ryan took another sip of his drink, feeling the warmth of the alcohol spread through him. He had always thought revenge would bring closure, but instead, it had brought a kind of numbness. He didn't feel triumph, but he didn't feel regret either. It was simply done, and now there was only the future. The next morning, Ryan's alarm woke him early. He had to leave for work, but before he left, he slipped into Jack's room. His son was still sleeping soundly, clutching the stuffed dinosaur Ryan had bought him after Alicia had moved out. He looked so peaceful, so innocent, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had unfolded between his parents. Ryan bent down and kissed Jack on the forehead, whispering softly, "I'll see you after work, champ." As Ryan left the house, he felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. His work life had improved dramatically over the past few months. Throwing himself into his career had been a coping mechanism at first, but it had paid off. He had recently received a promotion, something that had not only increased his financial stability, but also given him a renewed sense of purpose. At the office, his colleagues noticed the shift in him. He was more focused, more driven. Gone was the distracted, hollow man who had once been consumed by the turmoil in his personal life. Now Ryan was in control of his job, his home, his future. During his lunch break, a coworker named Julia, whom Ryan had gotten to know over the past few weeks, approached his desk with a smile. "Hey, Ryan, a few of us are grabbing drinks after work. You should come along," she offered casually, though her eyes lingered on his face with a hint of interest. Ryan hesitated for a moment, glancing at the framed picture of Jack on his desk. It had been a long time since he had even considered the possibility of moving on, of letting someone new into his life. The idea felt foreign, but at the same time, tempting. "I'll think about it," Ryan replied with a small smile. "Thanks for the invite." As the day wound down and Ryan returned home, the familiar comfort of his routine with Jack greeted him once more. They cooked dinner together, played a few rounds of a video game, and settled in for the night. This was his life now, a life built on the ruins of his old one, but stronger, more secure. And while the thought of a future without Alicia had once terrified him, now it didn't bother him at all. She was part of the past, part of the nightmare he had survived. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Ryan was ready to live again, to thrive. As he sat on the porch that night, sipping another glass of whiskey and gazing at the stars, Ryan realized that his journey wasn't about revenge or winning. It was about rebuilding. It was about finding peace after the storm. And as Jack's laughter echoed from inside the house, Ryan knew that he had already won. Not by destroying others, but by surviving and creating something new. For the first time in a long time, Ryan smiled. Not a bitter or vengeful smile, but one of quiet contentment. He and Jack were going to be just fine.